there's been abundant research published, and of course all of it's bad. So abrupt climate change finally has entered the scientific lexicon. And so, for example, here's from the July 25th issue of Science, and I think last time we talked it was July 25th, so this paper hadn't come out yet. And it was about synchronization of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. And the study found that synchronization of the two regional systems began as climate was gradually warming. After synchronization, the researchers detected wild variability that amplified the changes and accelerated into an abrupt warming event of several degrees within decades. Several degrees within decades. So global average temperature rising several degrees within a few decades seems problematic to me. And 8 days later, there was a report in Nature Climate Change indicating rapid warming of the Atlantic Ocean, which has turbocharged the Pacific equatorial trade winds. And currently the winds are at a level never before seen on observed records, which extend back to the 1860s. So when this phenomenon ceases, when the winds are no longer turbocharged, changes will include a sudden acceleration of global average surface temperature. So we're in the midst of abrupt climate change, and it's only speeding up and getting worse every day. Finally, you probably heard something about the Stockholm University mission to the Laptev Sea, and in this mission, the first reports came out in late July and said, quote, results of preliminary analyses of seawater samples pointed towards levels of dissolved methane 10 to 50 times higher than background levels, end quote. Jason Box, the relatively well-known climatologist who mostly studies ice on Greenland, in an interview with Vice published on the 1st of August of this year, he said if a small fraction of the Arctic carbon were released to the atmosphere, were fracked. Actually, he said another word that rhymes with trucked. And so it's pretty clear that we fired the Clathrate gun. And there's scientific evidence in the referee journal literature going back 5 years. And now, Jason Box concludes that even if a small fraction of the Arctic carbon were released to the atmosphere, we're in dire straits. And it's clear that we're there. Simultaneous with Laptev Sea mission, several large holes were discovered in Siberia. You might have read or heard something about this. The reaction from an article published in the July 31st issue of Nature indicates atmospheric methane levels more than 50,000 times the usual. 50,000 times. An article in the 4th of August 2014 edition of Wonders. If you have ever wondered whether you might see the end of the world as we know it in your lifetime, you probably should not read this story, nor look at the pictures of methane blowholes, aka dragon burps. So the evidence continues to accumulate that we're in the midst of runaway climate change, and that the methane bomb or Clathrate gun has been fired from the Arctic Ocean. Not only that, but we now have catastrophically rapid rise of methane coming out of the former permafrost, especially in Siberia. This is a realization that I just reached within the last month. It seems to me that previously I thought the Clathrate gun from the shallow Arctic seabed was the primary problem driving abrupt climate change. Now I think permafrost degrading into methane has reached that same level of disaster. So I think we have a double-barreled shotgun at this point, and both guns are pointed right at our head.
Okay, first of all, it cut out when you were mentioning the article that shouldn't be read. If you could repeat what that article is, that would be great.
Sure. An article in the 4th of August 2014 edition of EcoWatch ponders the holes, quote, if you have ever wondered whether you might see the end of the world as we know it in your lifetime, you probably should not read this story, nor study the graphs, nor look at the pictures of methane blowholes, aka dragon burps, end quote. And so that's just from a week ago today, that in a media outlet focused on ecological systems, somebody concludes that if you want to know if it's all coming to an end, don't look here, because the answer is yes.
Well, that's not good, is it? In your opinion, then, when you say clathrate gun, for those who don't know, perhaps you might just sort of briefly describe what that means.
Yeah, the clathrate gun or the hydrate gun is a description of methane clathrates, which are small chemical cages around methane molecules. So methane clathrates or hydrates are these chemical cages surrounding the methane molecule that are sitting at the shallow seabed in the Arctic Sea, down, roughly 500 meters, plus or minus a few hundred meters. And as it warms, those clathrates begin to bubble up, begin to rise up, and are released sometimes into the ocean, and in the most disastrous of cases, directly into the air. And that's disastrous because methane is more than 100 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, molecule for molecule. So when you have methane being released directly into the atmosphere out of the shallow seabed, that's a problem. And so this firing of the clathrate gun, which evidence indicates started in 2007, when it goes exponential and appears that it has, that's a sure sign that we're in the midst of abrupt climate change that is irreversible. This is the phenomenon James Hansen worried most about in his book Storms of My Grandchildren. And that book came out in 2009, I believe, and now the evidence indicates that we'd fired the clathrate gun 2 years before that.
Now, there are 3 Siberian holes, supposedly, and at the bottom, maybe methane in greater concentration. And that's all there is, though? They're just 3 holes?
Well, we don't know. It's a very remote area. So far, they've found 3, but remember, for the first few days, they'd found 1, and they thought 1 was catastrophic and an indication of very rapid warming to come. So, yeah, there have been 3 found so far. Will there be more? It's hard to tell. I think by the time it's all said and done, we might be looking at 9 holes or maybe 18, just so some giants can play golf.
There's just no way this could be just a temporal thing. You're saying this is an inevitability now, that the gun has been fired, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and as an analogy, I think the gun was fired a long time ago, 7 years ago now, and it's a Gatling gun. So there are more bullets coming at us than the human species can withstand. We probably can't withstand 1 bullet, and because the clathrate gun's gone off, the permafrost is melting so rapidly, and there's so many other self-reinforcing feedback loops in play at this point, I think there are dozens of bullets headed at our head, and there's no shield, there's no escape.
This methane one evidently is just so overwhelming it could handle the end of population all by itself, right?
Oh yes, it could lead to, and you know, this is the phenomenon that Paul Beckwith had studied. He's a climate scientist at the University of Ottawa, and he has studied this phenomenon looking in the deep past for many years, and he concluded in September 2012 that we could expect a 6 degrees C temperature increase within a decade. And then about a year later, he said we can expect up to a 16 degree centigrade temperature rise within a decade or 2. That's just based on that one self-reinforcing feedback loop, the clathrate gun, the firing of the clathrate gun, or the methane bomb, methane rising out of the shallow sea in the Arctic Ocean. So yes, that one is enough, but we didn't stop it.
So, actually, what you're seeing now meets all of his expectations and more?
Yes, for the Arctic, it's pretty clear to me that the Clathrate gun was fired in 2007 or so. We have refereed journal literature going back to August 2009 about the impacts and then further illustration of the firing of the Clathrate gun. So we have, at this point, a lot of refereed journal literature in places such as Geophysical Research Letters and Nature Geoscience and Science and NASA's CARVE project, indicating that the Clathrate gun has been fired. So I don't think there's any unburning that bridge, that the bridge is already fully consumed by flames, and the infrastructure is burned up completely, and what we're seeing at this point is the last flames flickering before it blows us all up, basically.
And so you're saying perhaps this 16-degree temperature rise, which would be centigrade, correct?
Yes.
Could occur within 1 or 2 decades?
Yes, that's what Paul Beckwith concludes, and concluded in November 2013. And even that 6-degree rise that he mentioned in September 2012, that's enough to do us in as a species. 6-degree centigrade global temperature rise. Remember, we haven't had humans on a planet 3.5 degrees centigrade warmer than baseline, which is 0.85 degrees ago. So 6 degrees is a huge number, and it's difficult for me to imagine there would be habitat for humans at a 6-degree temperature rise within a decade or two, much less 16C.
So how soon are we going to see manifestation? For example, in a year, in a month, in 3 months?
Well, the authors of a paper in Geoscience indicate that a 50 billion ton burst of methane is highly possible at any time. So it could happen this year, next year, the year after, when the Arctic is ice-free during September. That would be, I hate to use the word ideal in this kind of conversation, but that would be the premier conditions under which we could expect a tremendous burst of methane at any time. That could warm, just that seemingly minor burst of methane, which is very minor relative to the amount of methane present in the clathrates in the permafrost. That 50 billion ton burst of methane could warm Earth by itself by 1.3 degrees centigrade. So that takes us up over the political target of 2C in a very short period of time. How quickly? Really, it could happen at any time. It could happen this year. It could happen next year. And add that on to all of the other self-reinforcing feedback loops. A sudden warming of 1.3C, which takes us over 2C, is going to further accelerate all those other self-reinforcing feedback loops. Permafrost degradation in Siberia and throughout the world's boreal forests. It's going to accelerate decomposition of peat in the world's boreal forests. It's going to continue to decrease the albedo from the ice that is rapidly disappearing throughout the northern hemisphere. Methane is also being released from the Antarctic, as well as from the Arctic. Forest and bog fires are growing, and you don't have to turn on the news for more than a few minutes to recognize that the fires are growing and are completely out of control. By early this month, early August 2014, tundra fires were burning just 70 miles south of the Arctic Ocean, and the fires were creating their own weather by pyrocumulus clouds. So they were generating such towering thunder clouds, they were generating their own weather. It's not like this hasn't happened before. I was a firefighter many years ago, and I saw fires that generated their own weather. But now we have them up there right next to the Arctic Ocean. It's supposed to be cold and wet continuous fires burning in the Arctic, no matter what time of year it is. And so you stack all those together, and they're reinforcing among each other as well as within themselves. And, no matter how you look at it, it doesn't give me a lot of optimism for continuing our run as a species beyond 2030. And with every day, it appears to me that the evidence grows and indicates that our run might actually be shorter than that. And if we have a 16 degree centigrade temperature rise within a decade, much less two, as Paul Beckwith expects, well, that's done. That's game over. There's no way humans survive. There's no habitat at 16 degrees centigrade above baseline, much less above where we are right now.